Oh,
I'm on the line here. Okay, go ahead.
all right. Here we go, everybody. We're live. This is David Carr with Steward Your Business. I'm here with a couple great colleagues tonight. This is our time to share, and we're going to be talking about leadership tonight. Each of these have been leaders in their own company, and I'm honored to have them here. This is a shared experience with all of us. So, Curtis, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself, that would be great.
Absolutely. Curtis Cochran here. I own a mergers and acquisitions firm, consulting firm, actually, and we developed it's called the E4 math philosophy system, which is really the four cycles of business ownership. And been working with small businesses, well, businesses anywhere from half a million to 100 million in assets, but we help business owners eventually not only grow their company and become better, but greater, and eventually exit with all their hard work and dollars to go with them. So that's what I do. But thank you for inviting me. Love it.
Oh yeah, this is great. Thanks, Curtis. And Stacy, would you like to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm Stacy Kinoshita. I am a business resource specialist and a financial planner. And what I do is I work with business owners on strategies to address their two main workforce concerns, their two main concerns, which would be their workforce and their cash flow. And then I do that by putting together employee benefits and employee programs for them to attract, retain employees and address issues such as their workers' comp exposure and their premiums, as well as see if they qualify for tax incentive programs to infuse cash back into their business. And so, and working with areas such as succession plan, I think Curtis does that too. And so, been doing this for well over 7 years, and um, I love helping the underdogs, the small dogs, compete with the big dogs. That's what I love doing. So,
There you go. Well, I think, and we all love honestly small businesses because we are all small businesses, and we love helping other small business owners. So I'm just going to help facilitate the conversation tonight. But really, this is not just David. This is all of us. Curtis and I and another colleague Charlie talked last week about beliefs, and so we wanted to share this, come out to you guys tonight. We are actually live on LinkedIn, so if you're there on LinkedIn, we'd love to have comments. Feel free to drop in a comment. Um, and share any thoughts as we're going live here. So this will be opportunity too. It'll be recorded so people can come back and enjoy and learn from this group. So I'm going to start with the idea tonight. I talked about leadership. That's a passion of all of ours, and a focus of mine in helping groups and individuals. And so I thought one of the tools I really like using is a tool called the Five Voices Assessment, and it's about understanding your leadership voice. And so before we get into I'll be sharing some more details on that one here on the next 45 minutes or so is our time tonight. But I just thought um, wanted to talk with you, and I'll start with you, Curtis, first, and then we'll go with Stacy to just an opportunity. But in your experience in business, and whether you're a business person or just generally in life, what leadership, I want you to just kind of give me your feedback on what leadership means to you. How does it show up in your life, um, in your business? Just share a little bit from your perspective of what does leadership mean to you. So I'll start with you, Curtis.
Well, I've always, and really this comes from my father, and of course, he had his own business, and I started working for him in the oil field at the age of 8. And one of the things that he always told me, even as a kid, is you just have to show up. You want to be a leader, even when you are never prepared, not even prepared, and even when you're prepared, you just show up. No matter what your gut says, all those little butterflies that go in, and the fear of maybe speaking, or the fear of making mistakes, or that's going to come. All of those things, all those emotions come. And ultimately, he just simply said that, look, you show up. You show up, you take the beating, you take whatever's there, and after you're done, you learn from it. And ultimately, that was his idea of leadership, and I took that from ever since I was a kid, even into sports and even into college and even into what I do now, which is business, and that is I'll be the first one to tell you that I don't know everything. And I'll be the first one to tell you that, but I'm here to help in whatever shape or form. And that's leadership. It's really taking everything and the other thing that he mentioned, and I totally agreed with, especially in sports, is that even when I was a coach or a captain on a team, I gave credit to everybody when we won, but I took all the credit when we lost. So that's the other thing with leadership. It's just the way it is. You accept it and move on and try to get better. That's it.
I heard a lot of great things in there, Curtis. Just showing up is important. Doing your part, participating. So we're going to talk about some of those more elements tonight, for
Good.
sure.
Good.
How about you, Stacy? What about you? What does leadership meant to you?
Yeah, that's a great question. About 20 something years, about 25 years ago, when I decided to open my learning center, I started out as a solopreneur. And when I opened up my center and started expanding, I started hiring employees. And and I knew that at that moment that I was in a leadership role. What I didn't understand until I got into the position was that everything rises and falls on leadership, and
Mm,
that I had to really work and still working at my leadership skills. I think a lot of people look at leadership as a position, but
yep.
as John Maxwell says, if
You
nobody's
go.
following nobody, you're not a leader. And leadership is about influence. It's about persuasion.
Mhm.
And there are a lot of people who
Yeah.
think that they're leaders because they have that title. But if no one's willing to follow you, and if you can't inspire people to move and change their life, or have them buy into a vision that you want them to follow you, then you're not a leader. And I think that can apply to so many areas of our life. It could apply to parenting. It could apply to just your job. It could apply to just being a neighbor. So leadership really.
Oh, we're waiting for Stacy to come back. She froze
Great.
for a minute. She was getting so
That was
excited. We'll give her a minute. Hopefully she'll come back here with us.
Stacy
We'll
hit the
pause.
freeze button because she was thinking about something else to
Yeah, she
say.
was thinking so much. Well, while we're waiting for her to come back here, I've been bearing with me as we're trying some different layouts and making sure everybody's showing up well.
Yeah.
I will actually put Stacy off stage for a second. Let's just see that. I think I can do that. And we'll bring her back. Let's see. There we go. So we'll hopefully get Stacy back here in a minute.
There we go.
In any case, so um, let's. Oh, I think yeah. We'll get back. So I think some of the things that you brought up, and I think Curtis, like you said, showing up, and then participating, engaging. No matter what, you're like, hey, I'm going to be there. I think that is a form of leadership, absolutely. Um, I think one of the kind of a foundation understanding is that I think everybody is a leader at some point in their life, but they don't always know how to express that maybe in the best way,
Mhm.
um, and how to access their what I call leadership voice. Um, and so how did you, Curtis, I'll just start with you. How did you determine like where you were skilled, gifted in your leadership? Like, how did you find out? Because we're not experts on everything. We don't know everything. But what was your journey to like, okay, I can lead people in what you do today, like how to sell a business, or I can lead, I can guide people in this way. And how did you, like Stacey was talking about influence and understanding, but maybe you could just share a little bit about your journey of like how did you arrive at that place?
That's an excellent question, and um, the and because I do a lot of and I've written several books and I do a lot of studying. on success. Um, and what's the difference between the upper 5% and the upper 1%?
Mm-hmm.
What's and I'm just throwing, what's the difference between, Tiger Woods and the number 150th golfer in the world? What's the difference between Michael Jordan and Larry Bird and all of the others? And I will tell you, it was just a small story about myself that actually it came out when Larry Bird uh,
Mm-hmm.
is actually said this, and even Michael Jordan. But even when I was playing basketball, um, and the score's tied or we're down by one, and there's seconds left. When I walked over to the bench, I already knew that I was going to get the ball to shoot it. Now, I didn't even think twice about whether or not I was going to get the ball or number two. I just knew that I was going to make it. Now,
Mm-hmm.
the percentages are there. I mean, maybe I, at best I was anywhere between 40-50% from the field, which at best. But
Mm-hmm.
there's something in your mind, in your head, that you just know you're going to do it.
Yep.
And where that came from is really, I think, partly my father, watching him do it every single day, even when he
Mm-hmm.
lost. I mean, I still remember when we were kids that my dad was. It was a Friday night, and he just had enough money to pay his employees. And his employees, he didn't get his money till the very end of the day. So they said, "Come on, buy the house." They came by the house. He paid them all in cash, because that's what he just got it from the bank, because they knew that they had families. And he walked in, and my mom said, "Well, what are we going to do for dinner?" Because he had no more money.
Oh,
He
wow.
gave it all to his employees. And he says, "Well, I just gave it all to the employees." And my mom said, "Well, what are you going to do for your family?" He says, "Well, we'll just have to figure it out." And it just dawned on me right there when I was just a kid. I'm thinking, wow, that is impressive. That's absolutely impressive. And heck, I might have been 9, 10 years old. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I just gave them money so that they could feed their family. And of course, my mom said, "Well, we'll figure something out," and we did. But those kinds of things that happened to me when I was a kid, I made me realize that you just figure it out, and you help people along the way. And that's partly kind of what I was a sponge back when I was a kid, so I just would absorb all of the things that my dad do, and that was the best thing, that owning your own business, because there's just so many variables that you have to look at and do, and be accounted for, and whatnot. But yeah, I think that's my experience back when I was a kid.
I like hearing that because it fits in with part of the five voices assessment we're talking about a bit tonight, that I just posted a link into the comment section for those of you that are following along that want to take it. It's free. But in that, what's interesting in the voices you just talked about, you said,
Mm-hmm.
like, your mom said, "Hey, we're going to figure it out. It'll work out. We know that's going to happen." There's a leadership voice in some that is much more future oriented, knowing they're looking to the future. They know things are going to work out. And that's a type of leadership voice, because they can see the bigger picture, they can see the vision, and they can see this thing. But then you have another leadership voice, and there's different styles, and this is what I love about the diversity of our uh, humankind, and is that there's also voices that are much more present, meaning literally in the moment, in today, that they're leading. And it's not one is better than the other. It's just, where do people naturally gravitate to?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I just love that your dad at the moment was like, he was leading in the here and the now. He knew people needed to be taken care of.
All right.
He was leading in the here and the now. And oftentimes I find this too to be true. Married, those that are married typically have different voices. So your mom, and you can confirm this or not, but your mom had a different leadership voice, and then your dad, but they complemented each other.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, if you appreciate that, if you can learn to
Right.
appreciate the leadership voices, right?
Right. Right.
Okay, we got Stacy back here. I'm going to add
Oh,
Stacy
good.
back in.
Good. Okay. There we
She's
Yeah,
go.
I
back.
apologize. You know what? My computer didn't die. It just went. Let me.
Kaput.
Yeah, that was weird.
We,
I do apologize.
we were just talking about, as you're coming back, Stacy. I was asking Curtis. There's different voices, and I call it the way they're oriented to the present and to the future. Typically, there's one to another, and he was giving a great story about his mom and dad at a time. And Curtis, I was just asking Curtis kind of just to confirm or share back with us, that perspective, Curtis, on the
On,
leadership voice and the
on,
future oriented, or both. Two things: the moving future oriented and present. That was one thing, but the other thing was just being complementary, so with each other and appreciating the different voices. You feel free to comment on any of that, Curtis.
oh, what was that you wanted me to do?
Commenting on the complementary of the voices.
Yeah. Yeah.
And just your experience in that. How do you work with different leadership styles or voices? And you gave a great, beautiful example of your parents in that
Right.
situation where they worked through it. That could have been a blow up, but it wasn't. They
Right.
appreciated the work with each other. But I'm sure, Curtis, you lead in a certain way, and you've worked with lots of different business owners, and there's different styles and ways of
You know
leading
what?
themselves.
I
You
was,
know.
I'm a member of several boards, several nonprofits, and presidents of several, and also profits. But this came up in our board, and even if you're not the president of the board, um, this particular he was the secretary of this board, and he said,
Mm-hmm.
look, our job as a board is to support our president, and that's leadership right there. Now you might not like what the president is actually, or the direction they're going, but you're still supporting what they're doing, and you have a voice. So when you talk about leadership, uh, it doesn't necessarily have to be the five-star general that's ahead of everybody. It's all of us, and
Mm-hmm.
part of it being the five-star general is to listen to your team, because your team is who you are and who's going to be the next leader. By the way,
Mm-hmm.
you're not going to lead forever, so your job is to help people become even better leaders than you are. Uh,
Right.
and that's really the essence of being a leader. Really, is to support and build other leaders, in my opinion.
Hmm.
I fundamentally believe that, Curtis. And to do that, you have to understand and embrace who you are as a leader and your style, so then you can appreciate others, right? And I think
Absolutely.
sometimes it starts with that self-discovery. And I was asking you earlier, because this was from my own journey of like learning more about who I was, embracing those things, and recognizing the things that aren't mine either. Too, it's like, okay, I don't have to be those things, and sometimes we feel like we have to be those things. And have you ever asked Stacy this question? So, Stacy, has you ever been working with somebody that they felt they had to be a certain way, a certain leader, but you knew it was inauthentic, that they were trying to position themselves or show themselves as a leader, but it wasn't really who they truly were? I think kind of like what I call it a presented behavior. I've seen this sometimes like on HOA boards or other places where people feel like they got to step into a place of power. They gotta have this certain voice. They gotta show people certain things or act a certain way. And when you get down to it, you're like, that's incongruent. It's not the same as I know you in other areas of your life. Have you ever
Right,
had that
right,
with
right.
you, with anybody?
I think I see that with a lot of positional leaders. They get a title, and then they believe that they have to behave in a certain way to present themselves to represent that title, not understanding
Mm-hmm.
that, and they think that leadership is again, I'm your HR director, I'm your boss, and therefore, and so I see a lot of leaders who do that, who exhibit that type of behavior, don't truly understand who they are. I'm gonna be direct, and don't understand
Mm-hmm.
their strengths and their weaknesses, and a lot of us are not, leadership is taught, and so you if you haven't studied what effective leadership is, then you resort back to something that you saw and you think that leadership has to be in that way. I see that even with husbands. They think that, I'm the head of the household, and then and especially with husbands who are believers, the Bible says submit, so you submit, and they don't
Oh
understand that there's
boy.
other parts
Yeah.
to that too. So again, leadership um, is affects all different areas of our lives. So I see that the more that a person truly understands who they are, and understands what their role is or what their goal is, and then how to leverage their strengths and understand their weaknesses to be more effective leaders. Those are the ones that step into a role and actually lead with efficiency. But those that just are, a lot of people don't have the role models, and they look at what was previously, my boss was like this, and that's how I'm supposed to be. So they're looking for a point of reference to be able to lead, and those are the ones that I see um, that are crappy leaders. I'm gonna be honest with you. So
They struggle. Yeah, I don't know. This is open to both of you, but what you commented on, Stacey, as I've gone through my career, titles don't mean as much to me anymore. They used to be more when I was younger in my career of having a certain title, and I'm like, oh, that means I did something, and there is some value to that. Don't get me wrong, but I think what you're saying, what I heard you say, Stacey, sometimes people feel like they get this title and somehow it transforms them or something, and it's like they're this different person, and I'm like, well, you're doing different, there's roles and responsibility, I mean there's responsibilities, but this, just because you have this title doesn't automatically make you,
a leader.
they
Well,
try to
I
become
think
this different person. Yeah.
right. I think that when people who don't understand what true leadership is or effective leadership is, and they get placed into a leadership role, they're trying to discover themselves as well. They're just trying to
Hmm.
discover how influential they are, what they're, and a lot of times, sometimes leaders, they're afraid to be vulnerable. And what they don't understand is that people admire leaders for their strength, but they connect with them because
Hmm.
of their vulnerability. And they try to shield that vulnerability, and then they revert to a behavior that they think represents that title. And it was probably something they saw from a previous leader. Okay, then my boss was like this. Or they there's all these different personality types. If they're are like a harmonizer when it comes to PCM, or if they are more relational, they may go back to whatever they're comfortable with. Okay, they might not even lead. They may feel like, well, we'll just let everybody. Let me give you an example. My ex was the uh, he was a manager at the Japan airline. It's called JALPAC. It was the travel agency part of Japan airline, and I think he had natural leadership skills, and I think he overall did well. And so when we left and we were transferred to Las Vegas, and so they needed, when we he decided to step down and come back to California, they had to find another leader to fill that role. And the person who filled that role was his best friend, who I don't think understood what leadership was. And so he fell back. I saw him fall back into areas where he was comfortable. He struggled to make tough decisions. He was more of a,
Hmm.
what do you
Hmm.
think? And maybe he shouldn't have even taken the role, because if leadership takes a lot. It's a courageous position, because there's a lot of personal growth that's involved when you step in that role if you want to be effective. And so I see how people who are put in positions of leadership, who are not prepared, because mentally they just think that it's a title, and then when they get thrown in there and they realize, oh my goodness, who does this person have to become? Sometimes they're afraid again to show vulnerability because they think it's a sign of weakness as being a leader. So
Well,
Absolutely. Curtis,
yeah.
go ahead.
Well, yeah. I was going to say that we missed you last week, Stacy, because this particular meeting tonight is kind of a segue from what we did last week, which was belief systems, because belief systems is really they tag along with everyone, even when you get into a leadership role. And when you get into a leadership role, are you making decisions based on an irrational, emotional response, or are you making decisions from a rational mindset? I mean, it's and I'm not saying one is better than the other. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that your belief system comes into play. And you
Absolutely.
said something right there when people are afraid to make decisions. And earlier when you were off a line a little bit, I said the showing up piece, because when you show up, guess what, you are going to make mistakes, and you
Mhm.
have to
Mm-hmm.
understand that. You have to understand as a leader that, look, I'm going to make a mistake, and you might as well just admit it to your team and say, you know what, I dropped the ball on that one, but let's try to recover. I mean, that's just the
Mm-hmm.
way it is. Sports coaches and athletes do that all the time. They do it all the time. They all know that when you make a mistake on the field, they know that you didn't mean to make that mistake. They know that you're giving it 110%, and you're just not going to make that mistake again. Period.
Because you learn from your mistakes, right?
Absolutely.
Right. So,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, this is a good segue. We in the next maybe 20 minutes or so, I'd love to give you guys a tool that I use to kind of help with this identification of your voice. I put it in the chat. You can take it for free, get your first voice, and if you decide that you want to go further with that, it's really easy to you can contact me and I can tell you how to walk you through that. But there's a great tool called the Five Voices, and it's a tool. It's just not. It's one of others, but it's one I really enjoyed using as part of my practice in coaching and consulting. And so I thought I'd take you guys through this idea and understanding. Um, there's some fundamentals understanding here, meaning we've already talked a little bit about these, but that there's everyone is has a voice and a leadership voice, but how is that voice heard? How is that voice presented, and in different, and Stacey, you brought up some different circumstances sometimes and how we lead. And so oftentimes people don't know that, or they're not clear on it. They're maybe insecure in it. Um, Maybe they immaturely overuse their voice, dominating others. So I wanted to share you briefly. I'm going to give you a brief overview. I won't go through everything in this. I'm going to be vulnerable, and I'm going to share my voice order, and I'll give you guys some fundamentals in here. But the goal in this is what you said, ultimately, Curtis, is we learn more about ourselves, is we know we can then lead ourselves, and then we can lead others in different areas of our lives. And so I'm going to share my screen here so you guys can see an overview. It should pop up in a moment. Let me see here. Let's see if this one works. Let's see. Okay. Share
and
screen.
by the way, David,
Present.
thank you for sharing that with us as well, because I think
Come on
that
here.
getting valuable feedback as to how effective we are as a leader is very helpful in helping us strengthen our leadership skills.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, we're all on a journey, right, Stacy? We're all learning. It's not never ending. So I'm just going to give you a lay of the land, an overview of this, and we can definitely go on a deep dive in future discussions. But the fundamental framework of the five voices is there's five voices, and on my screen here you'll see uh, pioneer, connector, guardian, creative, and nurturer. So I wanted to just give you kind of some orientation in here. We were talking about the voice and the strength. And if you guys want me to zoom in, can you guys see that okay? Do you want me to zoom in a little bit?
I can see it.
Good.
Yeah.
Yeah. So just for one thing I like to start is, where do most people fall? And most people fall in this nurturer grouping here, or guardian, if you guys could see that. It's over 70% of the population
uh,
typically, which means, and there's that means they're present oriented voices, that they're dealing with it today, like your dad, Curtis. Like, hey, what needs to get taken care of today? I'm going to make sure things get taken care of today and watch over those things. And then you have what's the pioneer voices, which are a subset, so they don't even make up as a whole, connector, creative, pioneer, they don't even make up 30%. So they're a grouping that's all future oriented. Um, And so I know, Stacy, you did your voice order, so you fell into the pioneer category. Curtis, you were going to check yours out. So we'll see if Curtis, on that one. But the pioneer is the smallest group, Stacy. So you're only in the 7% of the population that have pioneer as their voice. What's also interesting, remember, we say that all voices are there, but some are not heard. So this is the power or the strength of the voice. So typically, the pioneer voice is the loudest voice, connector is the next loudest, and so on and so forth. The nurturer is the quietest voice. Now that doesn't, they still could be a leader, but by voice, meaning how I present myself. And so, Curtis, I'm sure you've seen this probably in a boardroom, right?
Right.
You see sort of voice leadership styles. They're the first to speak, they're the first to talk, get over things, and you have other people that are very quiet, but they're still powerful leaders, right?
Extremely.
Was that Curtis's? Was that what Curtis was?
I don't know, Curtis. Did you have Curtis was going to do the assessment and get back to us. So
Yeah, because there was 80 questions, and I
80 questions. It takes about.
I think I had 30%. But I have a question about this real quick. Maybe you can answer. So the nurturing part, it's at 43%, and then if you look at the somewhat histogram or bar chart up above, it has one shaded. But as you go across the board, the shades get darker. Like, for example, the 7%, it's all shaded green. I mean, it's
right here.
Yeah. And
so that's voice strength. So they're the loudest voice.
Got it. Okay, I see what you mean. Okay, all right, very good. And then
so they're the smallest population,
right?
But in Stacey, you can tell me if this resonates with you. But typically, they're the first to speak up. They're the first to put a vision out there. They're the first to put things out there in a room. If everything all being equal, the pioneers are the ones that are going to talk first. They have a strategic vision. They are problem solving. They're results oriented. They're a pioneer is going out into the wilderness. You have to have a loud voice when you're in the wilderness all alone, right? If it's just you, you better have a plan. You better be ready. So does that make sense, Stacy? Because you're one of my pioneers here, so you can tell me if it fits or not. Yeah.
I think so. I think pioneers are not afraid to throw out ideas because they're not concerned about what people think about their idea. They're trying to explore
100%.
The possibilities. I think that's where the excitement is. It's like, well, if it already exists, it's like, okay, it exists, but what else is out there? What else can we do is what's exciting.
Yeah, they're innovators, they're entrepreneurs, they're people that are just asking those questions. And they're asking big questions. These aren't just little things. These are big strategic visions. Like, where could we be dreaming? And it can be, obviously that's super powerful and very much needed. But you also realize then, and with maturity and appreciation, like, how do I tap into the other voices? Because I need some people to actually help me implement and do some stuff here. That's the guardians.
That's
due diligence.
Well,
right. Processes, systems.
The other challenge would be to. Oh, I'm sorry, Curtis. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to ask David, as you go through these and somebody does an assessment, because you said you use this as a tool, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So, how difficult is it for somebody that's a nurturer to break out of their comfort level, their shell, so to speak, and become a pioneer, if that's what they so desire?
That's a great question.
Yes.
I'll go. So let me jump. I'm gonna pause for that minute because I want to show you some fundamentals here.
Okay.
So we'll come back to this. So the goal of the 5 voices is, we already talked about this. There's a couple of goals and assumptions I want to baseline that I want to present. The goal is that we have greater self-awareness and we learn, about what it's like to be on the other side of that leadership voice. We can actually become better aligned with each other. When we know this about each other, we can communicate more clearly. We can if we delegate better and make quicker decisions. There's some baseline assumptions here that I want to, that gets to what you're bringing up, Curtis. So while we have a makeup of 5 voices, some are going to be much more natural than others. And so I like to point out that nature, nurture, and choice all play a part in your voice. We naturally gravitate to, you know, a primary voice, the secondary, third. We can choose another voice, but if we actively choose another voice, it typically is draining our energy because it's not our normal way of being. It's not our preferred behavior style. It's not our so it's better in my experience if you learn who your natural styles are,
Mm-hmm.
is who else can I get on my team that has that other leadership voice so that I don't have to be that voice. You can be
Yes,
that voice, but it's hard
leverage.
to sustain, right? It's very hard to
Yes.
sustain over a long period of time, in my experience. Go ahead,
I, I
Stacy.
I agree with you. I agree with you on that. I know that I'm not the best nurturer. I could be very direct, but I've learned
Mm-hmm.
my weaknesses too. Sometimes people think that I don't care about them
Mm-hmm.
because I'm like, let's figure this out. Let's get it done. And
Right.
you could be having a
100%.
baby on the floor, and I'll tell somebody, "Can you take care of the baby on the floor?" But we still got this problem we got to solve, and so I can come off sometimes as being insensitive. And I think, Curtis, I think you picked that up too. I think one time we were talking about bringing in another colleague from M&O, and I said, "Well, he needs to show up," and you're like, you came on and you're like, all right, Stacy, because I was just like, "He needs to show up, so let's keep it going." So, you know, and it wasn't my intention was not to come off as insensitive, but I'm about like, look, if we're gonna get this done, let's get it done. If you're not here, then you missed the boat. Then you just have to figure out how to get back on. So, which can come
Yeah.
off harsh. So I've learned to soften the edges, and
Well,
especially as I think.
you're a step ahead, Stacy. That's great because you're hitting on some of the things which are your stress and triggers, and some of the strengths and challenges.
Mm-hmm.
We won't do a deep dive in here, but those what I do in my coaching program is I go one on one deep with everybody that does this assessment, and we go through all these iterations, and we get a clear picture of that. And what I really the power of this also is great because we do it with organizations, and I can see where all the team makeup is, which is kind of fun. I'll actually see if I can. I'll let me stop my screen. Well, I'll come back to it. There's a fun little in one I'll show you. But yeah, so it's important that we understand these things, and then we understand kind of where like you just said where your strength is, Stacy, because your strength is getting to the point and moving on, but realizing I'm not going to be a nurturer, and so that's going to be maybe a challenge for you. So what happens is we have a certain leadership strength, right? We could undermine our strength, undermine that power of that leadership style because we don't know how it cuts and hits others, and others don't also appreciate it because they don't know themselves. If they understand themselves, they're okay. They're okay with Stacy. Like Curtis, you were fine. Curtis could handle it fine because he knows who
Yeah,
he is,
right.
right? It wasn't like, oh my goodness, I'm so offended, Stacy. I can't work with you,
Oh no, that's hard to
right?
offend Curtis.
But that's a strong leader. I think Curtis, you
Right.
alerted to that earlier. That's a leader who knows their place. They're not going to be easily swayed because they know who they are. So there's a lot in this. I think I do want to show you one graphic. I'm going to move around. So there's things in here I'm just going to skip through because I want to show you guys. But to the point that you guys brought up, there's a good graphic in here, and this is customized to the individual that I go through. If you guys can kind of see this.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a way that you can stay healthy based on your style, that your natural voice style. So I'm a connector creative over here, which I like
Mm,
relationships, harmony, connection, ideas, vision, future. Pioneer, for example, Stacy, you and I share overlap with vision and ideas and innovation. There's an overlap here. When I start to stretch over into strategy, rationale, system stewardship, on like that's different. So you wanting to go in the direction. It's not that you can't go in these areas, right? It just means you're natural. This is your natural sweet spot. So for me, like again, this is my danger zone. you
what
know,
is that? What is that? It's hard being
guardian.
logical. Oh,
Yeah,
guardian.
getting too stuck in the details. Actually, I like details, but I can get stuck in the details, meaning I'm not in the side of I like being innovative. I like learning. I like keep asking questions and that kind of things. So there is some overlap. But if I'm getting into like systems rationale, that's not my sweet spot. My sweet spot, as you guys know, is connection, bringing people together,
Mhm.
brainstorming ideas. Um, and so once you get to know this, then you can go through and start to get really healthy about how you interact with folks. And so there's some basic ideas here on where your orientation is, your voice order. So you have a voice orientation and the nemesis voice. So it's kind of like your opposite voice. So for Stacy, you're a pioneer in this direction. So nurture is like you already said, I'm not a nurturer, right? You even said that with your own words. Like I don't nurture
Right.
people. I'm not gonna like look at their feelings and I'll be all harmony and everybody okay. That's not you.
Well, in
Not
a
by
business
default. I'm not
setting,
saying you couldn't
right,
go there.
right. In a business setting, can I nurture? Like, my kids, I was nurtured, but even then, I saw myself as, if the job is to clean your room, then can you clean the room? It's not like, you know, yeah, you're right. So it
Right.
does bleed into all areas of life. So,
And then fundamentally, you go down here, which is nice in this report, and I won't go through all of it here, but there's some overarching things that we look at when we connect with other people. We look at their worldview. We look at how they process information, how you make decisions, and then we can come up with some rules for engagement. Uh,
mm,
so for me, that's important that I encourage their guardians and invite them to ask me the hard questions. Because in the end they're gonna question me anyways. So, but if I invite them and engage them as a leader, I think Curtis, you were talking about that earlier. Like, how do we get those other voices, right? So there's ways we can go about it, but this takes time. This takes intention. This isn't accidental. This takes like it's really knowing yourself inside and out, so that way you can then learn. I can't start connecting with guardians if I don't know myself well enough. That makes sense.
absolutely,
Go ahead, Curtis.
absolutely.
Yeah, there was one of the questions that I read, and I said it was a good question on that survey that I didn't get a chance to finish. But I say this all the time, even when I talk to people. If I ask you a question, uh, I want to know your truth. I want to know your truth, not I don't want to have your answer to run parallel to my answer.
Mm-hmm.
And here's what I mean by that is when and again my father and mother taught me this a long time ago, is that when somebody asks you a question, you have to sit back and really analyze the person that's asking the question. Can they really handle my answer? Um, and this is in dialogue. This is in communication. This is even in business. One of the things, and I've said this before, you probably remember it on M&O, is when I walk into a business, I tell them two important things. I said, I'm not working for the IRS and I'm not the Pope. And the reason why I tell them those things is because they have to tell me everything about their business when I do an evaluation. Now, even with that being said, it takes 2, 3, 4, 5 meetings later for them to tell me everything.
Mm,
And that's interesting to me. And really that it goes back to their own experiences and beliefs that, when your wife asks you, okay, did you clean the bathroom? And you say yes, but you really didn't, because you didn't want to get yelled at, whatever that might be. That's a simple example, but the point still sort of remains the same. Is when somebody asks me a question, sometimes I have to ask them, are you sure you want to know the answer to that question? Because
Mm.
sometimes they don't, they ask a question with the idea that I want this pat answer to make me feel better.
right,
You
right,
see, and that's another skill that a leader has to develop or
acquire.
understand, that look, the reason why I'm listening is because I'm listening to what you are telling me about a situation. Now, when I ask a question, I want to know the truth. I want to know your truth, not what I think it is. Is
Mm-hmm.
that, am I making sense?
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
you
Mm-hmm.
are. And I think that that's where, as an effective leader, understanding other personality types is helpful.
Correct.
It's funny because then you have to be able to, as a leader, read, like you say, who are you talking to, and adjust to really. If communication is to make that connection, then you have to adjust your speaking style to connect with them, especially you're trying to get information from them. And so if you're
Mm-hmm.
talking to somebody who is a more of the nurturer, and you are more direct, you're going to cut off that communication. So
Absolutely.
that's where being a leader, you've got to learn how to be more effective. I remember just when I first started out, after you know moving on to a different business and moving into more sales. I would talk to business owners thinking that, well, we're business owners, and so we can just communicate the same way. And I would go out there trying to uncover these pain points, and asking them questions, and I would meet these eagle type men personality types, and they would get shut down because of the way I asked questions. Sometimes it was too direct. They didn't want to disclose the pain. So I had to go back and learn how to read that person. If they got pictures on the wall and their family, and then I got to be able to talk about their family, and break down those walls in different ways. And if I go in there and they're like, look, just give me the numbers, I don't have a problem with that, because I'm the same way. But I had to learn how to match who I was talking to, being
Sure.
and understand. So I agree with you. That's my responsibility as a leader, is to understand other personality types and be able to make that connection. But yeah.
Yeah, and that's why I like what you have in these five voices, because what you just
Mm-hmm.
said, Stacy, is that you have to you have to listen. I mean, you really do. If you listen, you can actually you can really kind of pinpoint which voice that the individual is, whether or not it's a nurturer or whether or not it's a
Absolutely.
pioneer
I
or
know, Guardian. Yeah.
you really know who you're talking to, but you got to be an actual a real good listener to the conversation for sure.
I will.
Absolutely.
I'll add to that. I was going to say, add Curtis. One of the beauties of doing something like this, though, because what you're doing, Stacey, absolutely you have to do. But if you incorporate this way of learning and understanding, it really starts to open up the door. If you have shared language, right? So
Hmm.
then you appreciate it's much quicker. Like we talk about making quick decisions, we understand things. So there's not so much, Stacey, you just spent like all this time trying to figure out this person. If they knew themselves and they could open up to them, you would be able to make so much more progress. But you're
Right.
like, well, I just have to take them where they're at, and that's what a leader does too. They recognize where the person's at. But the beauty of having a shared language, embracing this, it's I found very liberating, because you're like, oh, I don't have to be like you already say this, Stacey. I don't have to be the nurturer. I mean, I can tap it if I have to, but that's not who I am. So I'm not gonna, it's not justifying you to be, you being acting badly. It just means this is who I am naturally, and this is my strength. And so
Right.
let me use
Right.
my strength to help you. I actually really a great asset if you allow me to be in my natural best state.
I agree. I agree. When
This
it comes
is
to when we're talking about more of a team dynamic where you are the leader and you have teams. I think where the challenge in leadership comes there is you've got the stronger, not weak and strong, but you've got the personality types are more direct, and you got the nurturers.
Yep.
And when you've got a nurture leader, and you've got a bunch of
Like
visionaries
pioneers
and all
or
that, right?
creative. Yeah.
Or vice versa. How do you balance it out? And that's where you as a leader have to work hard and
Oh,
understanding
very much so.
your team. And so that's where the learning comes in.
you know
So
100%. Well, and Curtis, I wanted you to talk about this because I'm sure you like you're seeing the different voices in organizations that you're helping with, right?
yeah,
And you're seeing that.
absolutely. And Stacey, you hit something right there, and that is, that's why great leaders surround. If I'm a nurturer, I'm going to get four of the other voices around
Mm-hmm.
me, because I know I don't want four other nurturers, telling me that I'm doing a great job. I want four people around me that doesn't fit my
Right.
natural self.
100%.
And that's what
I love that,
a
Curtis.
great leader does, is they look, if I'm not I'm not the spokesperson, I'm going to get somebody in here that will tell everybody
Absolutely.
exactly what I'm going to do, and I'll just sit by and let them do their thing, because it's natural for them, right?
Right.
This is really good. I mean, I really like this, David. I know that
We're kind of at time here, but yeah.
but I mean, I think this would be something that we talk about again next week.
Sure.
There's just so much information and so much here, and if Tiffany and Charlie could join us, that would just add some
a different dynamic, and have you guys go through your voices.
Yes.
And then we could even role play a little bit, in the sense of a good way of, like, how do you deal, like you just said, Curtis, how do you deal with that? Because we could talk about some of the challenges, and then, like, how, as an organization, I'll just lead it, and potentially one we could talk about next week. As an organization, if you realize you are all nurturers or you're all pioneers, how do you solve that problem?
Right.
Because you surround yourself, right, with those. So we could talk about how do we brainstorm, because what we're here to do is, and why we're sharing this with you guys out that are watching this and checking it all in. And again, we want your comments, give us your feedback, what you're hearing there, is to give you some knowledge and get to know Curtis, get to know Stacy, get to know me, because we all have our different leadership styles. We all have our different background and expertise that we can help you in business. I specialize in part of the process like Curtis does. I specialize in team specifically, organization, health, and individuals. And you've got Curtis there with mergers, acquisitions. That's a big deal. How do you lead a company through a merger, an acquisition? I mean, that's a big, big deal. I don't do that stuff. Curtis does that. Stacy does all these great benefits and helping take care of people and helping the leaders just figure out
creating a company culture.
Yeah, how in the way that they take care of them, literally, with the benefits and the tools, Stacey, that you have access. So we're resources here. We want to provide you resources so that you guys can get to know us as we're sharing this. So we're going to continue to come back, and we've got some great people in marketing and IT and some other areas that have other business acumen. But I really enjoyed our conversation tonight, Stacey.
I did too. I really appreciate it, Stacey. Thank you, David. Thank you for putting this together. I love it.
Curtis and David.
Absolutely.
Appreciate it. Look forward to the next conversation. Look forward to continuing.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and end the stream here. Thanks, guys. Okay. Have a great night.
Okay. Good night.